in all this choice. That's what happens. People get confused. They don't know how to invest, and then they put into the wrong products because there's just too much flexibility, and then they end up being disappointed. So taking risk is okay, but I would say that the minimum sum should be kept intact and only be allowed to purchase into a CPF Life, a guaranteed payout stream. We can argue what the level of payout is, whether it's inflation indexed, but a certain amount should be kept aside in a safe stream of cash flows.
Okay.
Then other parts, anything over and above that, can be put into riskier products. They should be given the option, but the choice should be limited. I think the way it's done, it shouldn't be more than 3 choices. My view is some asset allocation products, which have different risk levels.
So you're going the other way. You would say less is better.
Less is better.
Okay, well, we have a caller on the line with us right now, actually. Albert, you're on the line with Talking Point. Go ahead, please.
Yes, hi. Yeah, I have a question. I would like to ask, I wonder if CPF can have the option of full withdrawal if the person will be able to prove that he has sufficient financial firepower to last him the whole lifetime. Would there be an option like this? Would they consider an option like this?
All right, Albert, thanks for your question. Let me check with the panel. What do you think of that idea?
Unlikely to happen, that's for sure. But I think there's something to having a social policy that everybody's involved in, kind of like NS, right? So if you're really financially savvy, I don't think you should worry too much that a portion of your savings locked up in CPF. You know what to do with the rest of it.
Yeah, exactly. Like in the forum, right? The panelists said that CPF Life is not for people who live in Sentosa Cove. We are talking about normal people there. So if you are,
that was me.
yeah. So I mean, if you are savvy enough to do your own investments and you have well and above the minimum sum, I think you shouldn't be worried about CPF Life.
So in fact, that's a good risk-free part of your financial portfolio that you should be happy with. The rest of your money, that is your own much lower opportunity cost, and you can do whatever you want with that, I think.
I agree. I agree with that. Yes.
Okay. Well, we do need to take off for a break. We're going to come back and continue this discussion because after the break, we'll talk about monetizing your home for your retirement. Should 4-room flat owners take advantage of the lease buyback scheme? Give us a call if you have thoughts on this issue at 669100028. You can also tweet us at TelTP. Back in a bit. And welcome back to Talking Point. Now, most people think of the CPF, not their homes, as a retirement resource. But now the government is urging people to take into consideration their flats as well, which are worth several $100,000. And to help retirees unlock part of that value, the lease buyback scheme is being extended to 4-room flats. We're going to talk about this in a short while, but I want to take a call that we have on the line with us. Tony on the line with Talking Point. Go ahead, Tony.
Hi, good evening, everybody.
Evening.
I'm not advocating what the government is saying, but I support what they're saying on the minimum sum of $155,000. You take basic sum exam. Nobody wants to have $1,000 after their retirement, as shown in the during the PM speech. But you take it at this $1,000 a month means $12,000 a year. In 10 years, it's $120,000. In 15 years, it's $180,000. Your minimum sum of $155,000 cannot cover you. In 20 years, it's $240,000. The life expectancy of a male, 65, is I think about 82 years.
Sorry, Tony, so what are you trying to say? Can you just...
What I'm trying to say is this. Your minimum sum of $155,000 cannot support you if you want $1,000 a month.
Okay, it's not enough.
It's not enough.
Not enough. All right, Tony, thanks for that. Any reactions? I mean...
No, that's the beauty of the program, right? CPF Life guarantees you that $1,200. Let's assume that's enough. It's actually not enough, we think.
Right.
Guarantees you $1,200, irrespective of how long you live for that $155,000 in minimum sum. I think that's the beauty of the program. It's a life product, not one that terminates after
10 years.
Yes.
So regardless of how much you have left, you continue to receive that monthly
bill.
We have another caller on the line with us. I'm just going to go over to Madam Teo. You're on the line with Talking Point. Go ahead, please.
Yes, hi. I would like to ask one question to my fellow citizen. Yes, there is a talking now every day about this CPF scheme, and this money belongs to us. so we have the right to do whatever, with our money. But my point is, do this pool of people think that if they withdraw all their CPF, if anything happens to them, and the worst scenario is they have no one to turn to. So if that happen, right, this pool of people become the liability to the society. Then it will come back to
Right.
who is going to
Okay.
be responsible for this pool of people.
That's right.
So maybe
Okay.
I think one option is maybe you make them sign. Yeah, you can withdraw all.
Well, Madam Teo, thank you. The point you've raised actually is something that has been discussed quite a bit as well, and I think let me get the panelists. Coco, you want to react to that?
Yeah, I guess she's talking about signing an indemnity, right? That, okay, I wash my hands off the system, right? Anything happens to me is my own problem, right? Not going to happen. If we get sufficient number of these people, society is bound to help them. So I think we just keep the basic system as it is, which is everybody is involved in it.
Yeah. How can we not help a fellow human being? Okay, we're going to come back to introduce the idea of the lease buyback scheme. We know it's being extended to 4-room flats now, and we have another panelist joining us now. Mr. Tan Kok Keong is the CEO of REMS, that's Real Estate Made Simple Advisors. He's joining us on Google Hangout. Kok Keong, thanks for joining us. The lease buyback scheme, let me get your reaction to that. It wasn't particularly well subscribed to when it was just for smaller flats. Do you think that by changing it to 4-room flat owners to include them as well, the take-up rate is going to be higher?
Oh, definitely with the change criteria, a lot more people are eligible. So by sheer numbers, the number of cases should increase.
But why will they be buying into? What do you think is will there be a change in their mindset or what they're hoping to achieve with it?
Okay, because right now you're extending the pool to include 4-room flat owners as well as those who have enjoyed subsidy before. So definitely a lot more households would qualify. But to judge whether the scheme is successful, you need to look at the policy objective, which is whether the policy can and be able to help people who are willing to be helped. Okay, the can part, definitely with the scheme, financially these people probably will be better off. But some needy household, they might still not take up the scheme because their house is their single only asset which they have stopped their whole life to pay for.
Okay.
So there's some pride, there's some
Right.
emotional tie to the property.
Which is not so
for
quantifiable.
this,
But you
Yes.
mentioned the policy objective would change. So by now extending it to, it was originally there to help low-income elderly, but by extending it to 4-room flat owners, you increase that net to a much larger, cast a much wider net. Has that paradigm shifted then? The idea of what its intentional purpose was?
I don't think so. I don't think it's just because we extend it to 4-room flats, people who have 4-room flats, we're trying to get everybody to sign on. I think it's really just there so that whoever really needs the money and has not decided to do one of the other schemes, it's available for them. So I expect the take-up rate as a percentage of 4-room flat owners to be quite small,
Okay.
but that's fine.
But it's open to more than half of all. We're talking about a large number of HDB flat owners. So has the principle behind it then changed?
I think the government's just being practical. We saw the clip earlier on the show saying that there's still a lot of people who do not have enough. They need to monetize their property. And it's just opening up the pool of money available, that means unlocking the value of your home, to a larger group of people who may not have met their retirement adequacy objectives. So I think this is not a handout, and it's more of being practical to allow more people to meet that minimum sum or whatever else they need for their retirement savings.
It's expanding the options.
Absolutely, yeah. But I would, a caveat would be, if there are any subsidies or cash bonus programs, which they do have in the LPS for the low income, you got to be prudent. You can't be just giving out free money to those who don't need it as much. You know what I'm saying? Because a 4-bedroom house will have a larger value. You'll be able to cash out a larger value. Maybe you should rethink, do they really need the cash bonus scheme, which is given free by the government as an incentive? So there's some things that have to be adjusted for those people, but overall, it's a very sound policy.
Okay. Well, that means the government is effectively taking on a larger role in helping fund the retirement for many citizens here, but the implications of that, especially if we think of it also on a more longer term scale, the sustainability of that, for instance.
Well, they have the collateral. They're getting the house and the land that the house sits on, right? I mean, the property that the condo sits on. So I don't think they are, taking on a huge amount of risk here.
Okay. Then, in that sense, why not extend it to everyone, all flat types?
In the US, reverse mortgages have got no income cap. Anyone can apply for reverse mortgages. So I think that's a reasonable solution. But the qualifier is not to give out any subsidies or implicit subsidies to those who don't need it as much.
Yeah, I guess the point is that if you do have a 5-room, right, or you have a private apartment, then people who own those kinds of units probably are a little bit more open to monetizing it, downsizing, getting a 4-room flat, right? So it's not necessary yet, I think, to extend it further. But I don't think there's any fundamental problem with extending it.
Right. Kok Kyong, what's your take on that?
I think the focus now is too much on the flat size. I think there's other qualifying criteria that applicants have to meet for this scheme. So it's not just everybody who owns 4-room flat or even larger flat, if they do decide, will qualify for the scheme. I think more importantly, I think all this policy review is a continuing effort by the government to adjust the scheme to fit the changing cost of environment, to help people sustain their lifestyle, especially the needy income group.
Okay, so from what I'm hearing, you're all saying that this is it's really just an additional option for people to look at. It's not the be-all and end-all. The Prime Minister actually did speak about other options. You can rent out a room. You can go stay with your kids and rent out the whole apartment. You can even downsize. But one thing that all this does is to assume that the market conditions remain positive in the years ahead. 20 years, 30 years, when it's time to retire, we don't know, right? So, a bit of a gamble?
Depends. First thing on economic growth, right, which is definitely uncertain, and second thing on population growth, right. If we go according to the white paper with 6.9 million people by 2030, there is a market for people to sell their houses, to downgrade, right. But the question is whether Singaporeans are ready to go that path, right. The white paper was passed, but there's still some dissension on the ground about this. But I think a series of initiatives that the Prime Minister has talked about is really pushing everybody towards thinking about monetizing their house, right? So I think if you, for example, if you let them withdraw a portion of their minimum sum, then they will really start thinking very carefully about monetizing the house too. So things are just moving that direction.
Okay.
Stephen, I have a little peeve on this
Yes.
housing I have to put out.
Sure,
because
go ahead,
otherwise
please.
it'll just remain within me.
Let it come out.
Let it come out. So you're actually retaining 30 years of your lease, and then you're selling off the residual component of the lease to the government. So what happens is that, let's say at 62, you enter into this program, 30 years long, 92, and you find out, oops, I'm not dead yet. You may have to move out.
Right.
Because the government says we will take care of you, HDB says we will take care of you, don't worry. But at 92, most people that I know don't want to move out of their homes. They're too old to move out, right? So I'm just suggesting, I've said it a few times, why not just change it to a life component? After all, how many people actually live beyond 92?
Right.
Let them just live in that house, because the last thing a 92-year-old wants to do is to pack their bags and move out.
Yeah.
So that's the component. I'm not sure, I can't guarantee this, because the take-up rate on reverse mortgages with life house shelter embedded in them are much higher in other countries like Hong Kong and US and so on. So my question is, are people not taking it up because of the uncertainty of what happens beyond if I outlive the 30-year lease? I'm not sure. That depends on the empirical evidence, but that could be the reason why.
Because at that point, it's really not about the practicalities, but there is a certain sentimental, and maybe it's just a few years, as you're saying. We were joking about it earlier when I said how maybe we should, if we knew exactly what we were buying into at the start, when you buy an HDB flat, I only buy a 50-year lease. Then the mindset changes. Well, the prices change too, but what do you all think of an idea like that? Could we ever go that way where we start, limiting what we're buying into right at the start so we have a better grasp of what it is we're getting into?
How much price downside do you get for 20 years less.
Yeah.
So it may work, so it may solve everyone's problem. It may be a good political move as well. Housing prices come down, and
people get less sentimental about the home because they know it's only 50 years
So maybe
long.
you can choose. You can buy a 20, 30, 40, 50. Okay, anyway, that's just me
They're
throwing it in.
interesting suggestions.
But you guys are the panelists, so I'm just here to facilitate the discussion. We need to take off for another break, but we're going to talk some more. Now, as we heard, the government is stepping in to fund those without sufficient CPF, but are we moving towards a social pension system? And what are the implications of that for all of us? We do want to hear from you. If you have thoughts, 669100028. Give us a call, please, or you can tweet us at TalTV. Back in a bit. And welcome back to Talking Point. Now, of course, talking about the CPF, and how you can use it in your retirement years. We have a caller on the line with us right now. Colin Ho, you're online with Talking Point. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, hi. Just want to make a point. Just now you mentioned that after people retire, right, one of the concerns of the government is that they're afraid that people are not financially savvy and then they'll splurge off their savings, things like that. But I guess it's risky to assume that all this for all the retirees. Instead of going through that notion, right, or is it possible that for those reaching retirement age and getting the retirement fund, to make them go through a course or a program or something, to make sure that they're being headed in the right direction, at least the do's and don'ts on how to handle your money? Would that be a much better way of letting the people handle their money?
Right.
It's just like if you're a kid, right? We just tell your kid, hey,
that's
you're not
right.
going to give your money every time. You're just going to withhold and withhold. I think it's more of education. Would that be a much better choice?
All right, Colin. Well, thanks so much for the comment. I think we did touch on this slightly a bit earlier, but anyone want to react to that?
I think financial education definitely is important, and more should be done, and more effective financial education. But I think one component of financial education is also when you teach people about investments. There are different pools of money. There's a risk-free pool, and there's the money that you can then take further risk. So the risk-free pool right now is the CPF. So leaving money there is not necessarily the wrong thing. And then the disposable income that you have that is earning you 0.125% in the banks, and that one you take risk with it. I think that would be something that could be effectively taught to people.
Okay.
I think the research that is done in the United States has suggested that financial education, while it's really important, is not a panacea. People who get the financial education, they still make the same mistakes. They forget stuff 6 months down the road. So I think just relying on that may not be enough. You still have to go for some default options, right? Automatic things.
Maybe it's a balance of some options available and some default options.
Yeah.
Well, over the years, there have also been concerns raised about Singaporeans who don't have enough in their CPF, low-wage, older workers, housewives without an income, and the government's now going to pay a bonus to such people who don't have a flat or family support to fall back on. And the philosophy of CPF retirement financing has always been is your own money for your own needs. But the Silver Support Scheme, that's what we were just talking about, does it mark an important socio-economic shift? And why do you think that is, Joseph?
Well, if you're referring to it that we're moving to a pension state, I would say no. We're talking based on a means test that we're talking about the lowest 10% or decile of Singaporeans. So I don't equate that with us moving into a welfare state. But I do recall reading the press post the National Day rally, some suggestions to expand it, broaden it, and I get worried when I see that to everyone above a certain age without any means testing and all this stuff. Then I get worried because then we move towards a welfare state type program. So I think the current form, I'm quite happy. I think it's a great program, the Silver Support Program, and it should be endorsed heavily.
Well, the Silver Support Scheme and the social pension, in a way, they're not really that different.
No, it's one thing to create a safety net support system for the lowest income earners, right? I think that's the role of the government. You can't just say depend on your neighbor, depend on your children, depend on NGOs. So the government has a role to play there, and I think that's what the government has stepped up to the plate and said we will provide that. And that too, it's not the only source. There's still other assistance programs also available. So I think this is okay, but once you start broadening it, because as I said, there's some suggestions, and I'm very uncomfortable with some of those suggestions, because that will be a huge strain on the finances of the government.
I agree with Joseph, actually. I think for the lowest income and the least advantaged in society, there's always a role for fiscal redistribution, for the government to actually step up and help. And I think as the rest of society, taxpayers should be comfortable, with the people who are least advantaged. Let's help these lowest income people. I think that's correct.
So how then do you think we should peg this bonus? How should we? What kind of means testing? How can we decide once again?
The kind of house they live in, definitely. Maybe you may want to access. Do they have children support?
Income levels.
Yeah, income levels.
Okay, let me because when we're talking about social pension, it was actually explored in a recent paper by Professor Mukul Asher and Azad Bali from the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, and they raised several important questions. How should the benefits or the bonus be pegged as a proportion of median wages or per capita GDP, perhaps? And how should the means testing be done? And also the scheme, how should it be financed, and where will the money come from? Bonus surpluses, budget surpluses, or should it be taken back from taxpayers? So, now let me get your input on this. So,
if you look at MediShield Life, right, I look at the tentative premiums increase. Young people, 20s to 40s, people with the most disposable income, they are paying triple. So I know the government is funding it, but I met my MP last week, and he said the young people will finance more of the old people's burden, so that when we young people grow older, the younger people will support us. So I think if my MP is right, we are going towards that trend, where the more
I think Professor Mukul Asher, who's really an authority on public finance with regards to Singapore, I think he had in mind a pension that's set at about 30% of the median wage, right? And he did some calculations in terms of how many percentage points of GDP that would cost the government, and he wanted it to be universal, right? It's not the same system that the Prime Minister has mentioned, right? I think he wanted it to be universal, for reasons of fairness, to make sure that there's some social solidarity behind the scheme, right? But I think Joseph is right. This is a little bit different from the kind of system that we are used to, but it is a system. A universal system is a part of the platform that the World Bank has recommended to be part of a social security system. Right? It can't be a big sum, but I think the guys at IPS have actually proposed a more limited version, which applies to 40% of the seniors, right? And they propose something like $400 a month, right? And that works out to be, less than $1 billion a year right now, which is pretty affordable at the moment.
So financing the scheme, not a problem, you think? I mean, if you mentioned if it's not that much money, it is sustainable and it can be financed.
Yeah, if you keep it at 400 and you keep the numbers small. Now, the guys at IPS are looking at 40%. I think Prime Minister is going way below that, right? He's aiming for people who don't have flats.
40th percentile of the income.
Right. The bottom 40%.
Bottom 40%.
That's what the IPS people have done. But I think Prime Minister has a much smaller group in mind. It will be much more sustainable than the numbers that the IPS people have come up.
So what about individuals? What can we do then? What should we be doing beyond looking at the state for that support? What can individuals do, and what other financial tools or perhaps education, as we talked about, can be given?
I mean, the point of retirement adequacy means that it's enough. If you are living a lavish lifestyle and you're always searching for what is beyond your means, then you'll never be enough. So one thing that, even though it might be not easy to say, but at the end of the day, do we really need so much? And if we can actually make certain lifestyle choices, do without a car, or take public transport instead, and buy cheaper types of stuff, cheaper brands or things, then you actually can cut down expenses substantially. So I think that is something that is very, very important to actually bring forth to at least people from a very young age.
So do you all think the individuals need to start, us as people need to start rising to the occasion a bit more, perhaps?
I think we should set our expectations at the right level. Many people, it's not just in Singapore, around the world, tend to buy homes bigger than they can afford. And luxury items, take the big vacation that they really shouldn't be doing. I mean, there's nothing wrong with taking vacations and going to overseas and so on, but do it all within your means. What is acceptable and
Right.
And don't worry about what your neighbor is.
That's right. That's why we're coming to visit you in Sentosa.
Very-
Well, gentlemen, thank you all so much for coming in this evening. We have run out of time, but that's it for Talking Point tonight. And next week, well, join us. We'll be discussing and moving beyond the paper chase. Can Singapore get over the obsession with paper qualifications and value people for what they bring to the job instead? We want to hear from you. Let us know what you think. Do so on our Facebook page, facebook.com/talkingpoint, or write to the letters pages of Today Voices and mediacorp.com.sg. I'm Stephen Chia, wishing all our viewers and radio listeners a very good night. Good night.